Welcome to Natality. I'm a perinatal psychotherapist and I work with what happens in the mind when you are becoming a mother. In the last episode, I talked about who accompanies a woman during birth and what the research tells us about that. And today, I want to go deeper into what happens psychologically and neurologically when someone is truly present with you, and why what happens in the birth room can stay with you as part of who you are becoming as a mother. In altered states of consciousness, across every culture, every tradition, the presence of someone who guards the passage was considered quite natural. Someone who knows this experience, someone who can be with you without losing themselves in the process. And birth is exactly that kind of passage. In active labor, the prefrontal cortex gradually lowers its activity. This process is called transient hypofrontality. This is the part of brain responsible for rational thinking, planning, and self-reflection. And as it quiets down, a woman moves into a more primal and less analytical way of being. This process deepens over time. A woman moves into an increasingly primal state, less and less mediated by analytical thinking. And that's exactly the point. That's the condition for psychological birth. But there's one aspect I want to describe more precisely, and it begins much earlier than birth. So during pregnancy, a woman's brain goes through a deep reorganization. We know this from neuroimaging studies that follow women before pregnancy, during it, and after birth. And this reorganization is most visible in one specific place, the default mode network. So what is it? It's the network that's active when we're not focused on any external task. When we think about ourselves, when we remember things, when we imagine the future. It integrates autobiographical memory, self-reference, language, social understanding, and from all of that, it builds a coherent inner narrative. So this is where our sense of self comes from, who we are, where we come from, where we are going. And pregnancy reorganizes this network. A woman are preparing to become someone different, to make room in their life for someone new. And it begins long before birth, actually. And then birth arrives. In active labor, as the prefrontal cortex lowers its activity and the body absorbs all attention, this already reorganized network enters a particular state. The narrative layer just loosens. You are simply there, in direct experience, embodied, intense, unfiltered. So women who have been through this describe it as transcendent, like being in another zone. Sometimes even as the pain intensifies, they paradoxically report a sense of calm, a reduced perception of pain, actually. Well, not always, but this state arises naturally as long as nothing interrupts it. So a woman can say, for example, time stopped existing. I was somewhere else, and at the same time, more inside myself than I have ever been. So these are not descriptions of confusion. These are descriptions of a brain that released the narrative and focused everything on giving birth. And this is where the question I find very important arises. When a woman is in that raw, unmediated experience of birth, who holds the function that has temporarily stepped back? Who guards the passage? The answer comes from the thinking of Wilfred Bion, a psychoanalyst who worked with deepest aspects of the human mind. Bion described something he called containment. In any relationship, there is a need to reach the mind of another person. Not necessarily through words, sometimes through gestures and behaviors that are received as a message in the mind of another person. Something that the other person takes into their own mind. So when a woman in labor experiences something too intense to process on her own, the person beside her, in a state of attentive and open presence, receives it. Doesn't push it back away, doesn't explain it immediately, doesn't always react to it. Sometimes simply holds it inside. And through that, they can understand what the woman is truly experiencing and respond to what is actually needed. Sometimes that means offering pain relief because they recognize that the pain had crossed a threshold that no longer serves the process. But sometimes it means saying quietly, "You're doing so well," because they saw that what she needed wasn't intervention, but confirmation that she was on the right path. Sometimes it's touch, sometimes it's silence, a presence that says without the words, "I see you, I understand what's happening here." You can move through this. So the words aren't always needed. Sometimes they're exactly the wrong thing. What contains is above all the quality of presence, a genuine willingness to be in contact, to receive another person's feelings and experience into your own mind, to stay with what arises in you, even though discomfort, even like just to wait until clarity emerges. And when something unexpected happens, because birth rarely unfolds exactly as imagined, this relationship becomes something especially important. When you know the person beside you, when you trust them, changes and surprises are less terrifying. Not because they disappear then, but because there is someone who will carry it with you. The relationship is the container of safety, especially in the moment of birth's passage. So a woman say to me, "I felt safe, and because of that I could let go and trust the process." Or, "I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that she knew, and that was enough." So containment doesn't begin in the birth room, it begins much earlier. It begins at the start of life, when we are infants and our inner world is still unorganized, intense, overwhelming, full of states we can neither name nor regulate. Someone does this work for us. A mother or whoever fulfills that function receives our states into her own mind. She understands that we are crying from hunger and not fear, for example, that we are trembling from cold and not pain, that we need closeness, not being distant. So she gives meaning to our experience before we can do it ourselves. And through repeated experiences of being understood, slowly, very slowly, this function becomes our own, internalized. We no longer need to do this. We no longer need someone to do this for us at every difficult moment. We carry within us the capacity to stay with hard states, to understand them, to find meaning in them. This is what Beyond meant by the capacity to process raw experience into something that can be held inside, in mind, and understood. So without this foundation, reality would be unbearable. And what happens then in birth? Well, when the prefrontal cortex lowers its activity, when the default mode network quiets, a woman enters a primal state. This state before narrative, before language, before reflection on herself. The body takes over, and that is exactly the point. This state supports birth. But the intensity of what happens then, I mean the pain, the magnitude, the loss of control, the unpredictability, well, is genuinely overwhelming. And it naturally brings up feelings a woman didn't expect. It can be fear, disorientation, sometimes anger, sometimes the sense that something is happening she doesn't understand and cannot control. And this is normal response to a state that is profoundly extraordinary. And in this primal state, just as the beginning of life, experience needs to be handed outward again. We need someone who will receive it into their own mind, who will hold what is intense and incomprehensible, and through their presence make us feel, I understand what is happening here. You can move through this. Not because something is broken inside of us, but because this is how our mind actually works. What happens in containment matters beyond the birth itself. An experience that was held in the mind of another person, in someone's attentive presence, can be integrated afterwards as a more whole experience, because the woman received responses and care that gave her sense of being met, of being understood. She can return to it more easily then, give it a meaning, make it part of her story as a mother more freely. An experience without a container, one that was too intense and too alone, more often remains fragmented. This is what I see in my consulting room, because there was no one to hold it and understand it. And that work, processing what went unseen, unheard, wounded, waits for later, often in the postpartum period, often in the first months with the baby. And it takes up psychological energy that is desperately needed elsewhere. A woman who experienced the presence of an attuned person during birth enter their first relationship with the baby with greater readiness for that meeting. That woman has more space. She can be with her child. She can feel proud of herself, of her strength, of what she was capable of. So to enter birth consciousness, to release the narrative and remain in that raw, direct experience, you need something very concrete actually. You need to know that someone is holding it for you, that you can anticipate who will be there, that you know this person, that you trust them. This trust doesn't come from just one meeting. It builds slowly in conversations during pregnancy, in contact that grows gradually, in the sense that this person knows not only your medical history, but what you're afraid of, what matters to you, how you respond when things get hard. A woman who enters birth with this, with the presence of someone familiar, with a predictable environment, with the ability to release control to this person, has an inner permission to enter the state of birth consciousness. She doesn't have to monitor herself. She doesn't have to access whether it's safe. She can simply give birth. This is what a woman needs, not a perfect procedure, not a flawless plan, a relationship built before birth, present during birth, there after it. And there is room for the father in this too. When care is continuous and relational, there is a greater chance that he will be invited into this process, that he will be seen within it, that he will have the chance to build his inner images of the baby, of you as a mother, of himself as a father. So, more about that in the next episode. And I would like to say at the end that birth is a passage through unknown territory. Where possible, you shouldn't make that passage with strangers. Good presence during birth, it's not a luxury. It's the condition that allows you to remain in the state that supports birth. It's the creation of an environment that holds you, that contains the uncertainty, the fear, the pain, everything too intense to hold alone. And that allows this experience, however it unfolds, to become part of you, integrated, meaningful, yours. If you want to explore how bonding with a child during birth can support your pregnancy and delivery, I've prepared a free ebook on this. You will find the link in the comments below. Your emotions are not the backdrop of birth. They're part of it. And they deserve someone who understands that. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Share what came up for you or what questions are still with you. New episodes come regularly, so subscribe so you don't miss any. That's all for today. Until next time.